The problem is only 6% of US adults have that capacity.
You know that feeling when you're doing everything right? Eating clean, working out, sleeping well, but you still feel like absolute garbage? Like your body's just stuck.
You don't know why you feel stressed all the time. You don't know why your body is not acting the way it is. You can't recover as well. Your mind's racing. You can't sleep. You just feel like you're not the person you were.
Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Scott Sherr, and we're diving deep into something he calls the sympathetic spiral of doom. And yes, it's as intense as it sounds. Let's get into it. Sympathetic spiral of doom.
Yeah, it's an ominous sounding name, and I don't mean to, get people scared or anything. But what I'm trying to talk about here is give an image or a framework for people that are kind of stuck in this fight or flight mode. They're stuck in this difficult aspect of their life where they can't calm down very easily. And certainly as a spouse, you don't tell your spouse to, calm down. That doesn't work. And a lot of this is not just because they have stress and that needs to be removed. A lot of times it can be because, although that can be a significant proportion of it, is that sometimes we get these insults that happen to us, infections, toxin exposures that affect a part of our cell called the mitochondria, which is the part of our cell that makes energy. And we have a huge amount of energy that we need to make on a regular basis. We have these mitochondria that make ATP. It's our ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We're supposed to make about 150 pounds of it every single day. And we turn that over to help make energy. And we have some cells in our body that have tons of mitochondria per cell. And we have some cells in our body that have very few, actually. Are actually number one and number two places that have mitochondria are going to be eggs and sperm, reproductive organs. After that, it's the brain, the heart, the liver, the musculoskeletal tissue. And so when you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you start having symptoms in those places, right? You have fertility issues, you have brain fog, concentration problems, mental health issues, and things like that. And so the mitochondria are really an important place to make energy. And there's tons of reasons why they're not working very well these days. In fact, the statistics are kind of crazy. It's about 94% of US adults do not have optimized metabolic or mitochondrial function anymore. So it's only 6% are metabolically healthy.
Wait, so is metabolic dysregulation, can I just call that out? And what is that coming from, do you think?
Yeah.
What is the main source of metabolic dysfunction?
Yeah, so I think maybe to define the word metabolic for people, because I think sometimes that can be confusing. The best way I like to think about it, so metabolic health, ideally, is when you're able to take energy from the food that you eat. Mostly it's going to be carbohydrates and fat, and you're able to bring that food into your body and take the electrons off your food. Food has electrons, it's got chemical structures, and utilize those electrons effectively to make energy in your mitochondria. Okay. And when you make energy, we're more like a gasoline powered car than an electric car. We have an engine that makes ATP, but we also make water, carbon dioxide, and something called free radicals, reactive oxygen species. And that's okay to some degree, but if we have too many of those for too long periods of time, we deplete the natural neutralization strategy of our body, which is antioxidants. So if you don't have enough antioxidants around, you can have too much of those reactive oxygen species, too much inflammation, and the whole system starts to break down. So metabolic health is your capacity to take the energy from your food, bring it to the mitochondria, and then make it effectively, and then detox effectively from the energy that you make. Okay. But the problem, as I mentioned, is that only 6% of US adults have that capacity. And you ask the question, why, right? And the real question, it's a great question, and there's a number of different answers to this. The number one reason is probably, it's between two. It's insulin resistance. So if your blood sugar is high all the time, you're getting too much glucose that goes to your cells that causes the cells to try to make a lot of energy, and that depletes your antioxidants, depletes your capacity over time. Also, and a big one is going to be sympathetic activation. So when you're in that fight or flight that we were talking about, that really does stress your mitochondria to make more energy all the time. It releases things like cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are neurotransmitters. Cortisol is a hormone. These are all good things to have in short periods of time. We're not supposed to have them all the time. And if we do, this really does have a significant effect on the mitochondria itself, making it very difficult for it to make energy over time. Because when it starts having more garbage and having a difficult time with collection, you see the garbage on the streets in a city and it hasn't been collected, and then all the bugs come and everything else. It's that's kind of what's happening with your cells, right? So this is a significant issue. So those are the number one and number two, but not that far behind this, Kate, is you have toxins in our environment, like mold. You have actual infections themselves, and you have even medications that people take on a regular basis can cause significant mitochondrial dysfunction, either directly or by causing nutrient depletion along the way. And so you have this any number of these issues, any number of these potential reasons. But the common denominator for all of them is that your mitochondria aren't working very well, not making energy effectively, you're not able to meet your energy demands. And then what happens because of that is that your body goes into this, or the cells go into this sort of stress response. It's called, the fancy name is the cell danger response. And it's true. It's called, yeah. And this is a normal response. But if we have these things that are ongoing for long periods of time, it becomes dysregulated. And what happens is the body goes and says, oh, I need more energy. I need to pump out more stress hormones to figure this out. And then you get more sympathetic activation. So it becomes this spiral where you're in fight or flight, you have mitochondrial dysfunction, the mitochondria are not making enough energy. They're putting out more stress hormones for you to make more stress hormones. So then it becomes this thing where you don't know why you feel stressed all the time. You don't know why your body is not acting the way it is. You can't recover as well. Your mind's racing. You can't sleep. You just feel like you're not the person you were. And that's because of the spiral. And it's a difficult one to break, but it's possible for sure.
2 questions on this. Actually, 2 things. I, first of all, went through this last year very, very clearly. I had the whole conversation with my therapist and my husband, and my husband's like, it finally came to me, he's like, I feel like you've just been negative for a very long time. And I thought, oh, it's just because my father had been in the hospital and I had to, had some work restructuring things and X, Y, and Z. But really, my body was taking a toll. I knew I had mold illness.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a big one.
I knew I had high cortisol levels. My chemical sensitivities were off the wall, making me going a little more ape shit in my mind, right?
Sure.
I'm dealing with the dogs and the house and all the things and my job and still trying to take care of myself. So I was spiraling out of control. I didn't know what was going on. I went to a naturopath. She gave me the HPA axis, chill pills. I think that fucked me up even more.
It can actually. And that's a big thing, is that when you try to chill out, but you don't have the infrastructure, machinery in your cells to actually support actual function, so making energy effectively, detoxing from it effectively, and you just give somebody to chill them out, it can actually make things worse initially because you don't have the capacity to work at a parasympathetic level, at a level that's relaxing the nervous system, because you just don't have that machinery available to you anymore. So that's why it's so important when you're looking at this, is that it has to be a multi-pronged approach, right? You have to think about supporting metabolic function, so supporting the metabolism with your mitochondria. You have to look at supporting the immune system. You have to make sure you're actually optimizing some hormones sometimes. And then once you start doing some of that, then it might be time to look at, okay, now we can downregulate that stress response. Now we can downregulate it, and you're going to be able to be okay. Because if you do it too soon, it can almost be detrimental. Actually, that's a perfect example of what I talk about, is that you need to have that baseline support before you do it. Because then when you take off that sympathetic fight or flight tension, that sort of clamped downness of it, then you actually can have the still capacity. But it's really important, right? Because if you just focus on the mitochondrial support, the immune support, the hormones and things like that, but don't address the cortisol rise, the norepinephrine and dopamine, the things like that happen when you have the stress response, those kinds of interventions are not going to be as successful in general. It's like what I always disliked what sort of conventional doctors would say, and I'm trained as an internal medicine physician, so I know this, but taking supplements is just you're pissing out expensive urine, right? And I actually mostly don't agree with that. But if you are in this sympathetic activation, there's very little you can do to actually see significant change until you actually downregulate the nervous system as well.
Wow. So what you all just said, that is such a blinding light into my eyes of I would say my soul. And yes, all along intuitively, I knew why am I going crazy? Why do I feel crazy? Why am I feeling irrational? Why am I snapping? But it is, yes, the central nervous system, which is such a simple way to say you just need to chill the fuck out, but you need to go for a walk or something. Yeah. And let me tell you, when you were talking about inflammation, your body reacting, my mast cells were on fire.
Yep.
After I had all these supplements, it was too much, too fast. I am going to share something that I went to my internist about a month ago, and I weighed X amount, right?
Sure.
And then yesterday I went again, and I knew I felt better because I knew I didn't have the inflammation in my spine because I could move my spine.
Yeah.
And I have lost 4 pounds of inflammation in 1 month.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. Like your body, when it goes into this inflammatory state, it holds on to everything. It holds on to more food. It holds on to more water. It holds on to everything because it's trying to protect you. And that's in evolutionary terms. Like if we didn't have a lot of food around, we had to be able to go into these kinds of states to be able to protect the body and save things like fat, right? So like when your cortisol levels elevated for long periods of time, like which is one of your stress hormones, you actually store fat around your organs, it's called visceral fat. And that kind of fat is the easiest kind of fat to mobilize when you have a famine, when you don't have food around. But we don't do this anymore. Many of us aren't fasting and, having feast and famine and that kind of thing. And so it's super common to go into these sort of hibernation stage where your body just doesn't want to do those things because it's trying to protect itself. So you have to get it out of that protective focus and get it more on the healing focus and sort of shift things out of that cell danger response. And so it's really a challenge, right? And I think about this in sort of multiple ways, but it's very important again is to think about it in those multiple ways because it's going to be different for everybody how to address it, but you really want to address that sympathetic activation along with that mitochondrial distress at the same time.
So breaking that down, using me as an example and as a guinea pig example, knowing that I am in the mold illness recovery phase and the hyperactive phase, recovery phase, what is step one? What is our first step to healing and getting back out of that doom and gloom state?
Yeah, I think the first step is to take a step back a little bit as best you can and knowing that you're ready to make a change, right? Like I think that like everything else they talk about when you're ready to, quit alcohol or cigarettes or whatever, like knowing that there's a challenge, there's a problem, right? I think and that could be hard for people because as you said, like especially women, it's very difficult because women tend to be like my wife is, like they tend to be like ruler of the house and have a lot on their plate. And women tend to have more capacity than men to be doing more than one thing at a time. That's just how women's brains work. And so it's difficult to kind of take yourself out and, I really don't feel good as much as I used to. There's something that I need to do about it, right? I think that's the first step, I think. And then from there, for me, it's a balance between supporting the system with mitochondrial support, with hormones, it depends potentially with immune system support, trying to give some like baseline foundation. Ideally, I like to do testing if possible and test what they need, test vitamins, minerals, nutrients, test the gut, the things you probably do with your naturopath and others, which this is important, right? But it's not going to move the needle entirely. And that's the big thing. It's going to start the process. Okay. What I like to do, I use this very interesting and very novel, but I think not many people know about, but people know about it now, is called methylene blue. I use a lot of methylene blue as a way to support mitochondrial function because not high doses, like 4, 8, 16, maybe 25 milligrams, but like enough to give a little bit of mitochondrial support because it's a really cool compound that has this capacity to help you make more energy and detoxify at the same time.
Break that down a little bit. Break down methylene blue. What exactly it is and what it's used for specifically, who it's good for, who it's not good for.
Yeah, so methylene blue has been around a long time. It's been around since the 1870s, actually, 1870, so a long time ago. It was the first drug registered with the FDA back in 1897. And it's one of these things that's gotten its heyday over the last several years after multiple years of research showing its potential capacity to really be effective in improving mitochondrial function, both on the energy production side and also on the detoxification side too. So it's well known as an antimicrobial. Actually, it's used in Lyme and mold protocols oftentimes as a way to actually treat the Lyme, treat the mold. It's antibacterial, it's antifungal, it's antiviral, it's antiprotozoal. It was the first drug registered with the FDA in 1897, as mentioned. And then also it was the indication for that at that point was malaria. So it's a fantastically versatile tool at higher doses, around like 1 milligram per kilogram ideal body weight, got 50 to 70, maybe 80 milligrams of methylene blue. That's a great anti-infective dose. And I do use that for chronic conditions, for chronic infections, and it can be very, very effective. And it's often used in Lyme and mold protocols now, and with a lot of effectiveness. And I think, and the reason for that is it's not only is it anti-infective, but even at those doses, but even at lower doses, it's supporting that capacity for you to make energy more effectively. So you have this part of your mitochondria called the electron transport chain. Short story is that there's these proteins on there and they can get dysfunctional. And if they don't work, you can't make energy, right? And oftentimes mold specifically has a significant effect on the first complex, the complex 1, which is where we make most of our energy from. And so as a result of that, you're in a poor energy state. So what methylene blue can do is to compensate for that, help you make more energy and help you recycle and renew some of that mitochondrial function and that flow of electrons through there. And at the same time, it not only helps with energy, but as I mentioned earlier, when you make energy, it's not free. You have waste products. We have carbon dioxide, water. They're not really waste products, but we call them that, and reactive oxygen species. But methylene blue can work directly as an antioxidant as well. So you have this gasoline-powered engine making ATP, and methylene blue can come in at these very low doses and start really being more like an electric car because it gives you no waste when you come out, right? And so low doses are key for that. Higher doses do cause more stress in the system, requiring things like binders and antioxidants and things like that. But like a good example of why it can be effective is that like many people that will go into a sauna, for example, they use binders, they use antioxidants, maybe if they're going through like a detox protocol, but they still feel like washed out after they get out and washed out and tired. But you add some methylene blue to that, not only do they have the antioxidant capacity, but they also have the capacity to make more energy too. So they don't feel as bad. They don't feel as washed out. And so bringing on methylene blue has been pretty transformative for me. I've been using it now in clinical practice for almost 6 years. And it's what I love about it is like something you can add on very early in somebody's path and start really seeing some benefit very quickly. So they start having a little more energy, a little more capacity. And then you can start looking at, downregulating the nervous system like we talked about, and also working on some of the longer term strategies of optimizing the gut and the hormones and things like that, which take longer. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know that moment when you're craving something crunchy, but also trying not to eat junk? Same here, folks. That's why I'm obsessed, and our family is, with masa chips. They're made with just 3 clean ingredients: organic corn, 100% grass-fed beef tallow, and sea salt. That's it. No seed oils, no weird stuff, just real crunchy goodness rooted in tradition. And trust me, they actually taste amazing. My pantry is never without them. And the best thing of all, guys, my family actually eats them. Holla frickin' Luya. So if you're trying to snack smarter without giving up flavor, give masa chips a try. Head to masachips.com and use my code TOXICFREEKB for 25% off your first order today. That code again is TOXICFREEKB. Your snack game just got a serious upgrade.
Wait, so back to the sauna, because I have a sauna, and I was talking to before the show started about cholestyramine, which my doctor recommended for me to take, which is a pretty intense binder, and I got it from the pharmaceutical. I do not take hardcore medications ever. And I, of course, read the label and I was like, I'm not taking this. I can use my black charcoal. I will be fine. Yeah. And I'm getting out of this environment. We're moving out of this house.
Right.
But back to the sauna, when I was using those combinations in this house, I kind of stopped because I didn't want to reabsorb what I was detoxing.
Sure.
I'm thinking now, when would I use the methylene blue? Before or after?
Typically before. Do you get it on board?
Bless you.
Never seen on a podcast before. That was the first.
There's an angel nearby.
Yeah, it must be. So I usually have people start methylene blue earlier, like 3 or 4 hours before, maybe 1 or 2 hours before they go into a sauna, because it's going to give you that capacity to make more energy and compensate for energy energy deficiencies you might have. But it also works like an antioxidant as well. Think about it this way: like if you're giving somebody antioxidants, that can potentially neutralize the stress of making energy, but it's not helping you make energy, right? What methylene blue can do, which is really cool, is it helps on the energy production side too. So how did you feel when you did your sauna? Was it feeling like you were pretty washed out, or did you feel like better when you got out, or was it hard to know?
Well, gosh, I do it actually frequently, and I kind of variate on the time.
Sure.
And sometimes I do feel overly relaxed, or maybe a little too tired to get kick-started again.
Yeah, that's common, right? Especially if you have more, detoxification to do. Taking binders, getting antioxidants is great, but if you don't have enough an energy source, it can be hard to maintain and continue to do it, right? And I work with people, or I have colleagues that work with people too, that you go into a sauna for 5 minutes and you can't move for 3 days, right? That's a common scenario in people have mold illness, that have chronic complex medical issues, where they have a lot of garbage in the system that's hard to clean up because they don't have enough capacity, right? So I don't use methylene blue forever in people. I find that it's a great way to get them started and get them feeling a little bit better. And then hopefully over the long term, it gives them more motivation to change their diet, change their lifestyle, get in some supplementation that's going to be really helpful, hopefully based on labs if possible. And then from there, we can dial it down and have them take it less often, or maybe just when they're under more stress, like going on an airplane, for example. There's great travel protocols using methylene blue because it can
my
calm.
husband's a pilot. I
Is he?
need to know all the protocols.
Yeah. So when you're on an airplane, you're pressurized to about 6,000 feet above sea level, or 8,000 feet actually. And so that's hypoxic stress. Like you're low oxygen on the plane. So he's low oxygen all the time. If you lived in Colorado, it'd be different because I live at 5,500 feet. But so it's not as big of a change for me. But that low oxygen level is very stressful to your mitochondria because all of a sudden you have less oxygen around, and then your mitochondria really don't have enough oxygen to make energy. So they get this backup process, they get inflammation, causes more stress on them. This is one of the reasons why when they close the cabin door on the airplane, you want to fall asleep.
Ooh.
Because all of a sudden you're at 8,000 feet and you're at sea level here. So when I'm in Colorado and I'm at 5,500, I go on a plane, it's not too bad. When I get off the plane, I'm usually at sea level and I feel fantastic. My Oura ring loves me because I'm finally back at sea level, because I have more oxygen capacity because I live at altitude. But what methylene blue can do, which is great, is that it can compensate for this low oxygen level. It can work just like oxygen in the cells, so you can make more energy. And at the same time, it also can help balance some of that inflammation that happens from being at altitude. The UV radiation that's up there, or the solar radiation, whatever you call it, along with the toxic air and the chemicals in the air. So yeah, I mean, I would highly recommend pilots typically take methylene. But we have a number of them that do actually.
Before they get on the airplane.
Before they get on the airplane.
Okay.
And depending on what kind of plane rides he's doing, like every 4 hours or so when he's on the plane.
Okay. I will set him a little travel pack and make sure he takes it. I'll get exactly whatever methylene blue that you use, and we'll set him up for success.
Yeah, we have somebody that makes it.
He loves when I just give him stuff. It's just
the only caveat to methylene blue, a couple, is that if you take it, your urine's going to turn blue.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that. Yes, exactly. So you have to be aware of that. And also, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, you shouldn't take methylene blue. If you have high blood pressure, your blood pressure can go up. You have to be careful. If you're on medications like SSRIs or SNRIs, the antidepressants, there's a potential interaction because methylene blue also increases serotonin, just like those drugs. Not to a significant degree at low doses, but if you are taking those medications, it's good to work with a practitioner if you want to think about using methylene blue as well. And it's treated in the kidneys, so if you have kidney dysfunction, you have to be careful too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good hot tips on that.
Yeah.
I want to jump into the hyperbaric oxygen therapy protocols in life. Okay, so I did a deep dive on just kind of some other podcasts you were on, and you were really doing an awesome job since you're pretty much one of the biggest known experts on HBOT out there. But tell us a little bit more about that, especially with the central nervous system.
Sure.
Especially with obviously healing chronic illness, autoimmune, the brain. Jump into that.
Sure. Yeah, I think the context here is I've been involved in hyperbaric medicine for a long time, over a decade, and it was my first foray outside of the conventional system. I grew up the son of a chiropractor, so very alternatively, but I went to medical school, so very conventionally. And my goal was to try to figure out a way to do both in some way. And I gravitated towards hyperbaric oxygen therapy because it was being used for conventional things. It was also being used for very unconventional things like brain injury and mold illness and Lyme and Alzheimer's and mild cognitive impairment, and the list goes on and on. And so I created an integrative practice around the use of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And that was kind of how I developed an integrative practice, knowing that hyperbaric therapy was a fantastic tool and technology. But over the years, I sort of started to understand that it wasn't the first thing you wanted to do for many people that were kind of going through a lot of the things that you are, or that others are, that have chronic complex medical illness. Because I found that over the years that if you went into the chamber too soon, you might get some benefit, but it may not be the benefit long-term that you really want, or that benefit might wane and not be kind of a permanent one if you weren't working on some of the foundational things. And the biggest foundational thing that we've been talking about really is mitochondrial function, right? Having the capacity to make energy effectively, because in a hyperbaric chamber, what you do is you flood the body with a lot more oxygen, and you get a lot more oxygen circulation. You combine oxygen with atmospheric pressure increases, and that drives a lot more oxygen circulation. And that's great. Oxygen's really great because you make more energy, but you also make more stress on the system. And that's how hyperbaric therapy works. It stresses the system to make more stem cells release. It helps to decrease inflammation, decrease swelling. It activates your immune system. It decreases inflammation, as I mentioned. It can treat organisms that do not like high oxygen environments. And then over the long term, it has the benefit of making new blood vessels and really creating a new ecosystem of like scaffolding of tissue that can be really great. But you have to have the machinery to be able to do that. And so what I often say is that when I'm working with somebody that has mold illness or that has Lyme, hyperbaric therapy can be really, really effective. But ideally, somebody's about 60 to 70% better already before they start thinking about getting into a hyperbaric chamber and do like the rest of the 20 or 30% or 40%, depending on what the difference is. Because that final push, hyperbaric therapy is great for, because it's a fantastic anti-infective, especially for organisms that do not like high oxygen environments. Mold organisms fall into that category. Some of the Lyme organisms do. Lyme itself doesn't like high oxygen environments. So you can use hyperbaric therapy as a way to really kind of accelerate healing in that capacity. So I use it a lot in that way, but I use it in the context of supporting mitochondrial function. And then the other aspect of it, which is really trying to help somebody's nervous system regulate better. Because if your nervous system is still hyperactive and sort of in that sympathetic spiral still, I promise that hyperbaric therapy is not going to be as effective either. I've had people that definitely should have gotten better over the years, but they didn't. And the only reason, because they just were too stressed. Their body was under so much of a stress mode that they couldn't relax. And you don't heal, you don't detoxify, you don't recover unless you're in parasympathetic mode. And so that's that other part of your nervous system that helps you relax, right? And so if we can't get you there, it's very difficult to do it with any therapies or technologies. And sometimes technologies can help you get there, help relax the nervous system. But like a healing technology like hyperbaric therapy is not as effective.
You know what I kind of want to point out here, because I want everyone to take this to home, because, parasympathetic, sympathetic states, central nervous system, a lot of times these are very invisible states that we're in.
Sure.
And it's hard for like our loved ones to see that we're perhaps suffering something because, it's from whatever. We'll use mold example for as an example, mold illness as an example, or an environmental toxicant. You can't really see, like, people look at me like, oh, you're glowing and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I'm really healing through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
When your body's under a chronic when your body is under chronic stress.
Yes.
And it can't calm down, it's really hard to see. I have all my limbs. Like, I'm super lucky, right?
Right. You don't look sick or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I think what I want everyone to take to home is to always check up on someone and believe when someone says something like, I need to take a step back, I need to go for my long walks in the afternoon, I need to take 2 weeks off, or I need to be alone, I need quiet, I need low light. Happens to me all the time. You saw my house. I need no light, I need quiet. I think those are helpful tools that our audience really needs to absorb right now. Because we can't do the healing if we don't have the support.
Right. Yeah. I think there's one system in the brain that's helpful for people to understand. It's called the GABA system. GABA is our primary relaxing neurotransmitter. It's called gamma aminobutyric acid. It's the brakes of our brain, okay? And it's always in balance with something called another neurotransmitter called glutamate. Glutamate's our primary excitatory neurotransmitter, kind of helps you stay up and awake, and we're kind of on and ready. And you have your balance with the GABA system in the brain. So glutamate is actually converted into GABA in the brain, and it requires magnesium and vitamin B6 to do that, actually. And so if you're magnesium or vitamin B6 deficient, you're going to have a hard time converting. And if you're always in sympathetic, always in that fight or flight, you're going to be GABA deficient. And GABA deficiency is something that I wish clinicians understood better, because symptoms are pretty common. Anxiety, depression, insomnia, tremors, irritability, mental health problems. But if you go to your doctor, you say, I have anxiety, or if I have depression, you're going to get an SSRI, you're going to get an antidepressant. The problem is, we know, like when I was in medical school, I learned that serotonin deficiency was why we had depression in patients. That's not true. There's no such thing as serotonin deficiency, in the sense that people with depression have no lower levels of serotonin than people that do not have depression. Okay. But they do have lower GABA levels on average too. So GABA is this unsung neurotransmitter that kind of regulates the firing of so many aspects of the brain. It's in all these areas in the brain where it helps regulate information. Like, you've heard of norepinephrine and serotonin and dopamine fasting and things. These are all your superstar neurotransmitters, but it's the GABA system that kind of rules the brakes of the brain. And between GABA and glutamate, that's 80% of your brain's neurotransmission. So if you can work on the GABA system, oftentimes you can see significant benefit very, very quickly in giving people the experience of coming down on bringing down their nervous system and letting them feel what it feels like to go back to where they used to be. But like you mentioned earlier, Kate, you had a difficult experience with this, and that's not uncommon if you're not also supported on the other side of things, right? From a mitochondrial perspective, immune perspective, hormones, depending on the situation. So it's a bit of a dance, but if you can find a way to have the experience of calming your nervous system down in a safe way, then you know where there is. Then you can get back there with your lighting, with your calming music, with your nature walks, right? Because then okay, this is where I want to go. And you can do some of the harder work of like picking up a breathwork practice or a yoga practice or, nature bathing or whatever we call it now, right? So those are really great, but sometimes hard for people to say, I'm going to do those kinds of things, right? So,
Yeah.
So I use supplementation sometimes to help here, but I think the main thing to mention is that taking GABA, so GABA, you can get it on the store as a supplement, but GABA itself is too big of a molecule to get into the brain. So if you take GABA and it works for you, it's often because the blood-brain barrier is not doing what it's supposed to do. It's called having a leaky brain, leaking things in that shouldn't get there. This is often the correspondence of having a leaky gut. So if you have a leaky gut inflammation, that's going to also inflame the whole body, especially the blood-brain barrier. So we saw this during COVID a lot, where people had COVID infections and they'd have reactivated Lyme, reactivated mold, reactivated Epstein-Barr. And that's because the immune system got significantly dysregulated. And then also that blood-brain barrier got leaky and allowed those things to kind of reactivate in the brain. So you want to use other compounds or other ways to support the GABA system as much as you can without, but if you use GABA and it works for you, it just means you need to get some work done on the cellular side and the gut side. And I've had patients where they were taking GABA supplements. They felt fine. They felt really nice and GABAergic and calm. And then we healed up their gut and the GABA supplements stopped working, that kind of thing.
Stopped working?
They stopped because as soon as you seal up the gut and seal up the brain, the barrier, you're not going to be able to get GABA into the brain anymore. And that's what you want, but you have to use other compounds instead to get across and help you.
Okay, so if we're not taking the GABA supplement, because we all know we like a quick fix out there in America, we're all like, give me the supplements, give me the injections, the shots. Like, what can we do?
Drink alcohol. Just kidding.
Well, there you go.
Well, so alcohol is like our most common GABAergic compound out there that people use. It's because what alcohol does is it binds. I'm not saying to drink alcohol, by the way. I'll get there in a minute. But alcohol.
Wait a second. Yeah. I thought we were joking.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what alcohol does, and then we'll talk about other things that can do a better job. But so alcohol binds very, very tightly to the GABA receptor, and it depletes GABA as a result of that. So this is why you feel good, but then 2 or 3 hours later after you stop drinking, you feel terrible, along with some liver detoxification things as well. But the actual aspect of depleting your GABA very, very quickly. So if you're already GABA depleted and you're drinking alcohol, you're making things worse over time. It's the same thing with Xanax and Valium and Ativan. These are the benzodiazepines of the world that people take. And also your sleep drugs like your Ambien, your Lunesta, and others that work on the GABA system too. So what you want to try to do is find natural compounds. So I use this as a way to get people the experience, as I mentioned. It's not something that I hope that people need to take all the time for the rest of their life, but I use things like kava, CBD, CBG, there's both non-psychoactive cannabinoids. I use something called B3 GABA, which is a B3 attached to a GABA molecule. And it's nice because B3 gets across the brain no problem, no matter if the barrier is not doing what it's supposed to do or it is. And so it gets across, it gets some B3, which is mildly activating, so it doesn't make you feel tired. Use another compound called hinokiol from magnolia bark, which is great. And then another one called agarin. And agrin's from a psychedelic mushroom called the Amanita mushroom.
Have you done mushrooms?
Have I done mushrooms?
Yeah.
Am I in a legal state to talk about this?
I think so. I don't know. We can talk about anything. We're good, man.
As a physician, I have to be a little bit careful what I admit to or what I don't admit to.
Okay, well, maybe or maybe not.
Yeah. What I would say that when it comes to the Amanita mushrooms, a long-standing mushroom in the lore of like Christmas and Santa Claus, and like it's a psychedelic mushroom, but it's toxic if it isn't dried. It has a toxic ingredient called ibotenic acid, but the other ingredient the main one is called agrin. And agrin's a long-acting on the GABA receptor. And it's great for sleep. So we have some products at one of my companies where we combine some of these GABA things together in ways that help you support the GABA system without depleting in the process. And but these compounds are great, and you can use them short term to get that sensation, get that feeling of, getting you more sleep, which is a huge regulator of your nervous system, as you know, or just getting more calm throughout the day as well, without feeling like you're like super tired.
I think one of the hardest things to incorporate change into our lifestyles is probably our cleaning products, because a lot of people think just because that smell is coming out, that means it's clean. But truly, y'all, you've heard me talk about this time and time again, that smell could actually be a toxin. So something that I've actually incorporated in our household, and I actually send the kits to all of my friends and family members as gifts time and time again, is Branch Basics products. Guys, Branch Basics never set out to sell soap. They truly are on a mission to help people create healthy homes and experience the power of pure. I am totally on this game as well. And someone that has been highly sold is our house cleaner. She has helped toss the toxins with me, and she uses Branch Basics for all of our cleaning necessities at our house. And let me tell you, we don't always live in a clean space. We've got 3 kids, 2 dogs, I've got a husband, so we've got a lot of things to clean up. 3 of the things that have really popped into my shopping cart lately are their new formula laundry detergent. Their toxic-free candle, because baby girl loves a good bath time and sitting by the candles at night when she enjoys her good veggie bowls, and also their hand soap. But 2 of the staples that I live by in our household, and trust me when I tell you I can use this for everything, even on my pups, is their oxygen boost and their liquid gold concentrate. So guys, I'd like to help you get started on your cleaning by giving you 15% off all starter kits. And also, guys, this applies to their hand soap and their toxic free candle, all the things. Not only will you get your starter kit, but you can get a whole bunch of other items to stock up on. Give the gift to yourself and use my code over at Branch Basics, which is Toxic Free KB. Guys, again, if you want 15% off, use Toxic Free KB.
So basically that getting to that rest and digest state.
Yes, that's what
overall. In that, I mean, I think, my going back to me, hello, Toxic Free with KB, all about me, you guys. No, I'm just kidding. But my experience over the last month, I dedicated myself to, okay, I have got to make all my meditation yoga classes, and I've got to make sure I do my afternoon walks with my dogs.
Yep.
And just go for a long walk for an hour, look at the ocean. That stuff helps.
It does.
It's so silly, because I'm the one that's like, what supplement should I be taking, doctor? Like, should I get on peptides? Should I, because when you get to a point of frustration, you gain 4 pounds and you're a tiny person.
Yeah.
And you're like, where's this coming from? It came out of nowhere and nothing's moving. Like, you're like, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
And then internally, there's a lot going on that you're really breaking down for me, Scott.
Yeah. Well, I try to bring it together here because it's really common.
Yeah.
And it's not well understood. And I think like once you downregulate the nervous system, give people the experience, like then they have the ability to get back there, right?
Yeah.
And you have the support of the mitochondrial function. Then I use hyperbaric therapy a lot and trying to be that sort of accelerator of the healing process. But knowing that when you're doing that, you are creating more stress in the system. So having to compensate for that. Do you need more antioxidants? Do you need more binders? Do you need more, detox support other ways? Do you need to be thinking of other things too? So it's really like it's a multidisciplinary way of thinking about things. We all wish it was one thing that was going to help everybody, but it's not. It's going to be multiple things, and those things are going to be different for everybody too.
Okay, so about HPOT.
Yeah.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I have heard, is the natural Viagra. Is this true or is this not true?
There was a study that was done on an aging population around 65 years or above, and they did, I think, 60 hyperbaric sessions, so 5 sessions a week for 3 months. And that's actually my favorite slide to put up when I lecture, is a picture of a penis, MRI, but it's an MRI scan of a penis. And so it's like a functional MRI of blood flow before and after hyperbaric therapy.
Yeah.
And nobody ever knows what it is. And I get to say penis at least 5 times on stage, which is great.
Everyone's like, oh my gosh.
Yes. And it's just, it's a good laugh. But what they saw is that you can regrow blood vessels everywhere in the body using hyperbaric therapy, including the penis, right? And so they saw that you could get, better erections after 60 hyperbaric sessions. And you had actually, that corresponds to a number of different studies that same group did, more blood vessels in the brain. So your brain starts to regenerate itself. Your heart gets more blood vessels. Your heart starts to regenerate itself, like in other areas too, right? So you have this capacity to regenerate tissue using hyperbaric therapy, right? And so it's how all the guys signed up after, seeing that study.
They're like,
But
I'm going to buy a hyperbaric oxygen chamber now.
yeah, but it's not like you just do a couple sessions and expect that to happen, right?
Right.
It's a significant amount of time. There's only certain types of pressures that might be helpful, because you can get different types of hyperbaric chambers. You can get milder ones for the house that are like soft bag kind of chambers. They don't go to like a lot of pressure, so not as much oxygen. And you go to deeper pressure chambers, sometimes to the house, but mostly at like an office or like a facility. And those kinds of chambers are typically more oxygen, more pressure. That's the kind of you need typically for those kinds of results. Although I have had patients over the years call me, a little bit like, "Hey doc, is this supposed to happen? Was I supposed to get an erection in the chamber?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good sign. Good stuff."
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So that does happen. But in essence, the deeper the pressure, to some degree, between like, it's called about 2 to 2.4 atmospheres, which is about the equivalent of about 33 feet of seawater. So we do it all from like diving, and that's how hyperbaric therapy came around. So you imagine you're like 33 feet below the sea, all that water above you is very heavy.
Yeah.
We simulate that heaviness in a chamber, and that drives more oxygen circulation, really.
Okay, so I'm a swimmer, as you
Okay.
can tell. We've got a pool.
Okay.
And
I don't know.
sometimes
Some
I,
people just look at their pool. So
no, I'm a swimmer. I swim down at the harbor too, but
nice.
I obviously I know that rest and digest state that I get after I swim
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, sure.
And partially I think it's because, you're constantly doing breath work during it. I'm doing
Sure.
long exhales and, short inhales every once in a while. But what I'm curious about is you were talking about the, like deep sea diving kind of analogy. And I'm thinking, I do water workouts here. I'll go to the deep end with a weight and I'll just sit at the bottom of the pool.
Yeah.
Is that a slightly smaller kind of like H-bot?
Well, the thing is that you're holding your breath. So you're not getting any actual air in your lungs
Got
when you're
it.
doing it. So it is a pressure, but there's no real air transfer what's happening. So the only way that would happen is if you were like had scuba gear on and you were breathing oxygen that way or something like that. So you could pull that off here, but in general, what you're doing is great. It's actually great for the parasympathetic nervous system to be able to learn how to rest and relax underwater. It's not easy for people to do because it's very inherently evolutionarily we'd want to not do that, right?
Right.
And that's something we'd want to get out of the water
Yeah.
and not be there with weights. So that's, if you can train your nervous system to be able to be calm down there, that's a great tool to have.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, our modern life is quietly suffocating our cells.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the H-bot is a step, a first step in like healing that. But when you talk about cellular regeneration,
Yeah.
what are some other steps that we can take?
So cellular regeneration really for me is a question of understanding that all of our tissues, all of our organs, everything is made up of cells, and everything is made up of the same basic cell. And if you go down to that, you realize, well, then I have to work on that, optimizing that basic cell. There's very few specialties that are involved in doing that. It's more, if you go to a functional medicine doctor, they look for root causes of illness. If you go to a conventional doctor, they put Band-Aids on things. That's what they do. So I think functional medicine is great, but then there's this whole field that's been burgeoning now that I've been a part of. It's called health optimization medicine. Health optimization medicine in practice is the long name. What I like about it, it's founded by a colleague and mentor of mine. His name is Dr. Ted Achacoso. And what Dr. Ted did was he create a framework that really tried to think about optimizing that basic cell, looking at it not only from a tissue perspective, but actually from a cellular perspective. And we use a field called metabolomics to do this. Metabolomics is a long word, but it basically means that you can look at real-time measurements of what's happening in the cell now and what just happened. So you get a sense of how energy is being produced, how well you're detoxing, how well you're optimized for your fatty acids, your minerals, if there's heavy metals on board and things like that. And then also very important about the framework is that you can actually look at shifting nutrient gut hormone networks to when we were at the most optimal age, which was between 21 and 30 for the most part. So we focus on optimizing to that age range for nutrients, for gut, for hormones. And so you're not optimized for somebody that's 65 or 45, because most lab ranges you get at the regular lab will be anywhere between 18 to 65 for adults, and then you get a normalized range there, which I think is kind of too wide of a range from my experience. And so we optimize hormones to 21 to 30, optimize nutrients and gut, and so that is focused on optimizing that basic cell, optimizing the gut, optimizing your capacity. Because if you have good cellular function, you're going to have good neurologic function too, right? Or at least better than you did before. And so that's like the foundation of it. Also, for me, cellular regeneration starts with looking at what's happening under the hood and really trying to like optimize at that level. But and at the same time, do the simple things in life, right? eat better, sleep better, move better, relate better, to have better relationships, get outside, get more sun, have good sex, all the good things that are important, like that sound really easy to say, but they're not. And I get that, right? So not everybody's ready to move and go swim in, the harbor, or go take a walk around the block. This just feels so bad, right? And so like you have to give them some additional support along the way, because optimizing your health and cellular regeneration can take time. It can take months to years. And that's where things like methylene blue can come on board. That's where like optimizing the GABA system can be helpful, because right now you can get some relief while you're doing the harder work of looking at, well, why is this all happening in the first place? And then once you start getting a little bit of relief, then like, oh, I do want to change my diet. I do want to get out of a bad relationship. I do want to sleep in a different room from my partner because they're snoring and keep me up all night. Right?
My husband and I do that. Do you do that with yours?
I don't, but you guys have safe divorce?
Oh no, we in the beginning of our relationship, it's not a divorce. We actually agreed on it. In our new house, we have separate bedrooms. It's great.
That's great. It's called a sleep divorce. That's what it's called. But
okay,
it's but there's a more positive one, like sleep union agreement or something.
Yeah, I think ours is sleep union agreement.
Yes,
for sure.
It's called. It's actually almost half of couples live or actually sleep in separate beds, which I didn't know was that common.
Royalty did it.
Yeah, it's common, right? And if you have a snoring partner, or they're taking all your sheets or whatever, right? So sometimes the other solution for people is if they don't have a snoring partner, but they can have two separate beds that are together, and then like at night they just put them slightly separate them and have different sheets and bed covers, so they're not sharing things at night, and that also works for people. But if you have a snoring partner, for example, you're not getting good sleep, even if you think you are. So it's a nice, and then you have your bed for, what we say, your bed should only be for two things. It should be for sleep and for sex.
Yep.
And if you have a sleep divorce or sleep union agreement, then maybe only one of those beds gets, but you should be reading in bed. You shouldn't be, watching TV in bed.
You shouldn't be reading in bed?
No.
Like before bed, you can't lay in your bed and read a book?
Typically you just go to bed. That's what you do in bed.
Oh God, no.
But if you want to read, you're supposed to read in a chair next to your bed, because the idea is that your bed is for sleep, and then you can program have you heard of like Pavlovian responses, right? Like ring a bell and you'll salivate, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is that you have a dog, you bring them food, you ring a bell, and then you have a dog, you ring the bell, there's no food, but the dog still salivates, right? So like you can like create these routines where you sort of proverbially salivate for sleep, where like the 15 minutes before you go to bed every night, you do the exact same thing every time. And as soon as you hit the bed, you go to bed, because that's what your routine allows you to do. Now, this is not always the case, but you can really roll into that for people. So so that's what I recommend, is having a really good sleep routine for people.
If you're enjoying the conversations we're having here on Toxic Free with KB, please send in a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow us on YouTube and TikTok at Toxic Free with KB. And don't forget, we're on Instagram at toxicfree.kb.
Okay, for optimizing the cell, right? Let's jump back to optimizing the cell. You said obviously there are simple things we can do: go for a walk around the block, eat better, go out in nature. But a lot of people, especially in our world that we live in, are like, I want the quick fix. I want the pill. Give me something right here, right now.
Yeah.
So at your practice, what is your solution step one to optimizing the cell, getting them on that running track?
I have to meet them where they are, right? I have to see kind of what they're going to be willing to do. If they say, I'm not willing to get out in the sun, right? Well, then we have to give them vitamin D, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not willing to start moving, right? I'm like, well, what can you do? Can you walk up the stairs a couple times a day? Can you do something? Like, what's the low hanging fruit that we can start getting going? But like, as I said, sometimes it is using supplementation or using technology actually to like give them some oomph for a little while, just to kind of get them going, right? So this is where methylene blue comes in the place for me. It comes in, sometimes I'll use like vagal neurostimulators or meditation devices, or this other, I have a friend of mine that runs a company that has a vibration that you put on your arm that helps relax you as well. So there's all these different kinds of things. And like, I have lots of tricks up my sleeve, depending on what people are going to be interested in. And then I engage them there, and I engage them in like these sort of low hanging fruits. Because once you can find these sort of like cornerstone things for people, then oftentimes it sort of like snowballs, into other things as well. So like a cornerstone habit is exercise, for example, where if you start exercising, you want to eat better, you want to sleep better, and then everything kind of, goes from there. So if you can find like a couple things that sort of like these critical points for them, where you can like open up a lot by just doing one small thing. This takes time as a clinician to understand. Like, this is not something that I learned, in a day. It takes time. And I'm still, working on it with patients. Sometimes I don't know what those things are for a while. I start with labs, I start with supplementation, I start with dietary changes, start with lifestyle stuff, we start with exercise, all those things. And then we have to kind of see, okay, where are things hitting, where are they missing, and kind of going from there. But, I really wish that there was a one-stop shop and one way to do all this.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go that way.
Yeah. I mean, we're all so complicated. And I think, gosh, this may sound really silly, but when it comes to healing anything, you brought a great example up with relationships.
Yeah.
Even relationships. Or relationship to yourself. That's one of my pillars, right? Is relationships, food and nourishment, beauty, personal care, and environment. But relationships, you have to be vulnerable in order to have a good relationship.
Sure.
You have to communicate. Same with yourself. You have to be vulnerable with yourself in order to want to make a change.
You
right?
do. You absolutely do. You have to have, the big part of this is understanding that on average, okay, we have about 70,000 thoughts every single day. There's different estimates, but this is the one that I like. And then I say to my patients, say to myself too, you have 70,000 thoughts. You're going to believe those today? Really? Why would we want to believe those? That you have 70,000 of these. Should you believe any of them? Your mind does crazy, says inside your brain, thinks crazy things. This is what minds do. And I have an 8-year-old right now. And I've watched this transition from trying to understand what's real and what's not real, what's fantasy. And then having this conversation, look, that brain of yours can make the craziest things. And his favorite way of kind of breaking this pattern, which I is what if French fries ate hamburgers? Something silly like that, because he can imagine that. He's oh, that's silly. That's never going to happen, right? That's the same thing as those squid that you were watching on Star Wars, eating up a ship. No, there's no squid here, right? It's the same imagination in your brain.
Right.
So having that capacity is very, very powerful. Once you realize that you can create space from your thoughts, but that takes practice. It's not going to happen because you're very easily going to be taken off by that next thought. And then you have a thought on a thought on a thought on a thought on a thought. And you don't remember the first one. What happened? How did this all start? I don't remember how we got here.
Yeah.
And so it's like a pancake,
Yep.
It's like pancake. And so if you can stop the pancake at pancake, slice, number 2 or 3, you've done a great job. And so that's where meditation comes in a lot for people.
Mm-hmm.
That's where mindfulness training can come a lot. That's where breath work can come in. A lot of different things. But in the end, that's where I'm trying to get people, is to have more space from where they think their mind is, or what their thoughts, right? If you can examine how your mind works, then you can reprogram it to some degree as well.
It's very interesting. You bring up those examples, meditation, breath work, right?
Yeah.
Which also brings in the rest and digest state, which breath work, the
Depending on the type of breath work, but yeah.
Yeah, regulation of oxygen, right? And, when you think about it, I'm going to break this down, aha moment, when you are in that fight or flight, you're racing around, you're rushing around, you're not breathing.
No.
Therefore, you're not getting oxygen into your system. Therefore, your cells are going,
Yeah,
So
you're hyperventilating. So most people are walking around breathing too fast. And when that happens, you're actually changing the oxygen CO2 balance in the body, making it harder to utilize the oxygen that you bring in. So if you measure somebody like you and me, and we're in a sympathetic state, oxygen level is going to be normal, right? But the challenge is how much oxygen you're actually utilizing in the body, because you have a balance of less actually CO2. That's changing your capacity to make energy, or your capacity to utilize the oxygen, excuse me.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
I do have a quick question back to the psychedelics.
Sure.
Right. Did we talk about
I talked about a mushroom called agrin. That's not a classic psychedelic. There's many others that are mushrooms that are psychedelic. Yeah.
Well, I am curious though, if you know the answer to what happens to someone when they're in the HBOT and they're on psychedelic therapy.
I don't typically recommend doing that without significant supervision. I've used lower doses of some of the psychedelics in patients because it helps with neuroplasticity. It can help with decreasing the neuroplasticity, is the growth of new neurons and new connections and things like that. I've also used it in combination with ketamine therapy for some people. That'll do the ketamine therapy and then they'll do hyperbaric therapy afterwards, because it can help kind of with integration, because the brain is very, very primed after a ketamine experience to be primed to make new connections and things like that. I've also used psychedelics in the sense of what's nice is that it decreases or dampens something called the default mode network. The default mode network is a part of our brain that gives us our stories. My name is Scott. I live in Colorado. I have 4 kids. These are the things that I like, these things that I dislike, these things that I want, these things that I don't want. These are my preferences of things. And then what psychedelics can do under the right circumstances is make all that much less relevant. And when you make that much less relevant, you realize that a lot of things that you believe are just stories. And then like the story of this is like, well, I don't do this because of this, right? I don't go to the supermarket because I don't like hanging around with people, right? Whatever it might be. Like that's a story you've created. Great. So you can reprogram that, right? Once you learn how your mind is programmed or how it has been programmed over the years, then you can change it, right? And then that's what sometimes psychedelics can be very, very helpful for.
Wow.
And you can consolidate those kinds of shifts with technologies that increase oxygen. So hyperbaric therapy is a great one for that. Absolutely. And I've used it in that capacity.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I have some rapid fire questions for
Okay.
you. Are you ready for this? I feel like I could, to be honest, I feel like I could talk to you like all the time. You're going to have to come back on for sure.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
But rapid fire, one habit that instantly improves cellular health.
Meditation.
Ooh, what type of meditation?
Using meditation that's going to be one that's where you're just, and there's all different types of meditation, but the one that I like the most, I tell my patients, is just spend 3 to 5 minutes a couple times a day just observing your thoughts. Because once you start getting some space from them, it can be very, very helpful. And that's easier so you don't get those pancake journeys that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
So instead of getting, just rolled by thoughts, you have a way to break space from them. It's not the easiest one to do it, but it's the one that I really do personally the one I use the most.
What is one supplement you think is overrated?
Good question. Probably NAD. I think NAD is vastly overrated. And I think that some of the other precursors might have more merit, but taking NAD itself is probably overrated, and people probably don't need as much as they think they need. And a lot of it probably doesn't get to where they think it gets.
Yep.
And there's also some issues where actually it might even cause detrimental effects on various other metabolic processes that could even, turn into things like malignancy over time and cardiac issues and things. So I think that one is way overhyped.
Thank you for answering that. My husband asks me about that all the time.
Yeah.
One biohack you personally rely on?
My infrared sauna. So I have a sauna in my house. I actually just got a new one. I'm very excited. It's an infrared and high heat together, a combined one, which I'm really excited. But I've had an infrared sauna since I found out that my son was going to be born. I had 3 kids. We thought we were done. And then surprise, we have 4 in a 3-bedroom house, 1 bathroom, 1,000 square foot in Northern California at the time.
No.
Like, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah.
There's no space. And so in my garage, I got this infrared sauna.
Yep.
And so every night, just about when I'm home, back in Colorado, I use it before I go to bed as part of my wind down routine. It's a big part of my way of just calming myself down for bed.
So good.
Yeah. Hyperbaric therapy would be second, but red light therapy.
Do you have a HBOT machine?
I do. Yeah, I have a soft chamber, a mild chamber at my house.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
One biohack you think is overrated?
That's a good question. Let's see here. What's one that I think is overrated? I think just, trackers in general have to be very careful, right? Because I think that they can be helpful in the short term. Like I have an Oura ring that I use, but I think people get over reliant on them. And as a result, a classic example, a friend of mine was telling me a story of like, he's a fitness guy. He's in fitness training. And he was asking one of his clients, well, he's like, well, how do you feel today? He's like, oh, my ring says I slept great. And I'm like, I love that answer to the question, because it's exactly what's wrong with wearing things and relying on data too much. So I think it's like, I love data. I think it could be great, but you have to be very mindful that there needs to be more, like, there has to be an intuitive side to this too, right? You can't just rely on these things to tell you how you feel. And so if you have an Oura ring score of 60, are you going to feel bad just because your Oura ring score said it was 60? You shouldn't, right? It's just a score, right? But in general, that can, ruin your whole day. So you have to be very mindful, I think, of how you use these things and how to, bring them into your ecosystem, but not rely on them all the time, or have them cause like a reactive anxiety because you didn't get good sleep, or your HRV was down that night, or whatever it might be.
That is why I don't have one, because back in the day I had a Fitbit and I literally would be pacing around in my kitchen until I hit 10,000 steps.
Yep.
No joke.
Yep.
I was like, is something wrong with this thing?
Yeah.
Crazy.
So there's merit to them, but I think that you have to be mindful that they can cause this sort of this challenge, as I just described, this anxiety related to the tracking and the numbers.
For sure.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much. What is your everyday non-negotiable?
One thing, or is it multiple things?
You can give me 2.
Okay,
you can give me 3.
I have like a whole bunch, right? But
okay, give me all of them.
Okay, let's give a couple here. So everyday non-negotiables for me are to spend time with my family and try to be as present as I can. The second one would be trying to be as good at what I do as possible, whether it's seeing patients in my remote clinic in telemedicine, or it is, showing up for the people that I work with in my companies that make various things, to really be as present as I can and be as helpful as I can, as the stuff that I do. And I think the third one is to try to regulate my nervous system. That's probably the overarching of all of them. It's just like, I have a tendency, like a lot of people, to just power through. Like, that's what I want to do. My physiology is just like, just go until you can't. And that's just, I grew up in New York. It's like the hustle thing. And like my father is like one of those people who doesn't need to sleep. And so he never slept. He was always working. And so I just have this like tendency to want to, so I have to build time in my schedule to say, I'm not doing anything for 30 minutes. Like, I'm going to go sit in front of my red light panel. I'm going to put on my headphones and I'm going to just meditate for 30 minutes. I'm going to take a break. So I actually put it in my calendar every day to do it. Sometimes I'm moving around, but it's there on my calendar every day when I'm home. 30 minutes of meditation and then taking breaks. I have a walking treadmill. I do other things. I try to, like, not that I'm going fast. I'm just trying to do things and change my state and get into more of a parasympathetic state. So regulating your nervous system is the most important thing that I try to do, I guess, overarching. And within that is trying to be showing up for and being present for the things that I'm doing at the time.
Beautiful. What is one easy toxic-free habit we can all start doing today?
Divorce. Just kidding. If you need it, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah.
Let's open this up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the person, right? But it depends on what your toxic habits are, right? But if you're in a bad relationship, that's one of the worst things you can be in, because divorce is like the biggest exfoliation you can have in some cases. I think it depends on the person, but I think if you're looking at this from like a day-to-day operations perspective, I think the thing that you can do, again, is regulate your nervous system, because that's going to be giving you more capacity to tolerate shit. Like, if you have more capacity, then you can tolerate more stuff that's not that awesome, right?
Yep.
You can tolerate more stress. You can tolerate more challenges. You can tolerate, things that you wouldn't be able to tolerate as much. Because if you're always in that sympathetic state, your reserve is very, very low.
Yes.
As you know, right? Your reserve to get more on your plate. And this has happened to me in times in my life. I'm like, I can't, like, something else happens. I'm like, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to do this? And I just don't know, right? And this has happened in certain times in my life. Like, when I found out I was going to have 4 kids, for example, like, how are we going to do this, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm so happy we have him. He's like, we have 3 girls and he's the youngest, he's the boy. And so we didn't plan it that way, but that's how it happened. He's great. And I love it. And, but I think the best thing you can do is, like, give yourself resilience. Right. And if you're resilient, you're going to be more resilient to toxic exposures. Take all the shit out of your house that's not, good for you. Get out of a moldy house like you are. Like, you have to do these things.
Right.
Absolutely. But as a big overarching, it's this nervous system regulation with support, like, along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In support in the relationship, your spouse or your partner. I think your partner, who you marry, is the number one most important decision of your entire life. So I think that is a really good hot tip to take away.
Yeah, you have to do some soul searching sometimes. Yeah. It's hard to make these decisions, but in the end, we have to do what's best for our biology. And then this is not being selfish either. People think that if you're just doing the best for you, you're being selfish. No, you're really helping everybody around you. If you are the best person you can be, right? If you're coming and showing up and having this sort of centeredness and this sort of presence and happiness, then that's going to reflect on all the people around you. It's going to reflect on your relationships. It's going to reflect on your opportunities. It really does make a big shift.
All right, guys, now it's time for hot habits. My hot habit for today is long walks. Yeah, really good habit there, folks. I go for long walks because I want to regulate my breathing back to normal. Just as Scott just mentioned, the central nervous system is key to cellular regeneration and healthy metabolic health in general. So going for long walks, maybe not wearing your headphones, just looking at the scenes around you, trust me, it will change your life in a number of ways. And our trendy trends for today is weight training over cardio. Aren't you a fan? I have found so many people choosing weight training over cardio activities, mainly because some of the benefits are it boosts metabolism and fat loss. Muscle tissue burns more calories at rest than fat, and body composition. Weight training is more effective for reshaping your body by reducing fat and increasing lean muscle mass, leading to a more meld physique. All right. Yeah, I've started to do a lot more weight training in my life. And let me tell you, it makes me feel much more amazing and less bogged down than doing those sprints up and down the mountain. If you guys love this content and want to follow me over on Instagram at toxicfree.kb, on TikTok at toxicfreewithkb, and on YouTube at toxicfreewithkb. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, you're doing your best, and your best is great. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for watching Toxic Free with KB. Please subscribe to the show, comment below, and check us out on Instagram at toxicfree.kb and TikTok at toxicfreewithkb. See you next time. This is a Kilo Bravo Media production.